The evening air in downtown Atlanta was thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin like a second layer of clothing. Streetlights flickered on as dusk settled over the city, casting long shadows across the polished sidewalks. Cars hummed past, their headlights cutting through the warm twilight, while the distant hum of conversation and laughter spilled out from nearby restaurants and bars. It was the kind of Friday night that promised connection, opportunity, and maybe even a little magic. In the middle of it all, a young man stepped out of a rideshare, adjusting the strap of his duffel bag over his shoulder. He was dressed neatly, dark slacks, a light blue button-down shirt, sleeves rolled just above his elbows, and clean white sneakers. His hair was trimmed close, his posture relaxed but alert. He'd spent the last hour reviewing his notes for tomorrow's event, a weekend leadership summit hosted by his university's business school, held at one of the city's most respected hotels, the Grand Meridian. He'd earned his spot there, not through connections or luck, but through late nights studying, leading student initiatives, and presenting research at regional conferences. This weekend was supposed to be a chance to meet mentors, network with professionals, and maybe even land an internship. He'd saved for months to cover the registration and hotel stay, determined to show up looking and feeling like he belonged because he did. The Grand Meridian loomed ahead, all gleaming glass and marble, its entrance framed by tall potted palms and a canopy of soft golden light. A doorman in a crisp uniform nodded politely as he approached. The lobby inside was even more impressive. High ceilings, plush carpets, the quiet murmur of polite conversation, and the faint scent of lemon polish and expensive perfume. It felt like a place where important things happened. He walked confidently to the front desk where a young woman in a navy blazer greeted him with a practiced smile. "Good evening. Checking in?" "Yes," he said, returning the smile. "I have a reservation under my name." He gave it clearly, spelled it out when she asked, and handed over his ID and credit card. She tapped at her computer, her expression shifting slightly, just a flicker, but he noticed. Her eyes darted toward the back office. A moment later, a man in a dark suit emerged. He was in his late 40s with a tightly trimmed salt and pepper beard and a posture that seemed designed to intimidate. His name tag read Gregory Holloway, Guest Experience Manager. Gregory didn't smile. He glanced at the screen, then at the young man, then back at the screen. "You're here for the university event?" he asked, his tone flat. "Yes, sir. The Business Leadership Summit. Starts tomorrow morning." Gregory nodded slowly, but his eyes narrowed. "We've had some concerns," he said, lowering his voice slightly, though not enough to avoid being overheard, "about individuals who don't have confirmed stays trying to access guest areas." The young man blinked. "I have a confirmed reservation," he said calmly. "I booked it 3 weeks ago. It's under my university's group code." Gregory didn't look back at the screen. Instead, he crossed his arms. "We've had reports of people lingering in the lobby, making other guests uncomfortable." "I just got here," the young man replied, keeping his voice steady. "I haven't even set down my bag." A few guests nearby paused their conversations, glancing over. One woman in a pearl necklace looked away quickly. Another man, older with silver hair, watched with quiet concern. Gregory leaned in slightly. "Look," he said, voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. "I don't know what you think you're doing here, but this is a high-end establishment. We maintain certain standards." The words landed like stones. The young man felt a familiar heat rise in his chest. Not anger, not yet, but the sharp sting of being misread, misjudged before he'd even spoken 2 sentences. He'd been here before in different forms. The extra scrutiny at stores, the security guard who followed him through a mall, the professor who assumed he was in the wrong classroom. But this was different. This was public. This was supposed to be a place of opportunity. "I understand you want to protect your guests," he said carefully, choosing each word like stepping on thin ice. "But I'm not causing any trouble. I have a reservation. I'm here for a university event. If you check the system, you'll see it." Gregory didn't move to check. Instead, he turned to the front desk clerk. "Pull up the guest list for the summit," he ordered. She did, scrolling through names. "He's on it," she said quietly. "Room 714, paid in full." Gregory's jaw tightened. For a second, it looked like he might back down, but then his eyes flicked to the young man again, taking in his clothes, his skin, the way he stood. Too calm, too composed, as if he had a right to be there. Something in Gregory's expression hardened. Even so, he said, we've had complaints about loitering, about people who don't fit the profile of our typical guest. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. The young man didn't flinch, but inside something cracked. He'd heard coded language before. Fit the profile. It wasn't about clothes or behavior. It was about him. His presence alone was deemed suspicious. I'm not loitering, he said, voice still level. I'm checking in. Like any other guest, Gregory shook his head. I'm sorry, he said, though his tone held no apology. For the safety and comfort of our guests, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The young man stared at him. You're asking me to leave? Because I'm black? Gregory's eyes widened slightly as if shocked the words had been spoken aloud. That's not what I said, he snapped. This is about conduct, about maintaining order. But I haven't done anything, the young man insisted. I walked in, gave my name, showed my ID, that's it. 2 security guards, both in dark uniforms, earpieces in place, had appeared near the elevators. They hadn't been called yet, but they were watching. Waiting. Gregory took a step closer. Don't make this difficult, he said, voice low and sharp. If you refuse to leave peacefully, we'll have to involve the police. The threat hung in the air, heavy and cold. Around them, the lobby had gone quiet. Conversation stopped. People pretended to look at their phones or study the artwork on the walls, but their ears were tuned in. The young man felt the weight of their silence, the unspoken agreement that this was normal, that this was how things were done. He could argue. He could demand to speak to corporate. He could make a scene. But he knew how that would look. A young black man raising his voice in a luxury hotel lobby. They'd paint him as aggressive, disruptive. He'd lose either way. So he took a slow breath. He picked up his duffel bag from the floor where he'd set it. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded like a drum against his ribs. Fine, he said quietly. I'll go. He turned and walked toward the exit, feeling dozens of eyes on his back. The automatic doors slid open, and the warm Atlanta night rushed in to meet him. The city sounds returned, the honk of a horn, the bass from a passing car, the chatter of people on the street. But it all felt distant, muffled, like he was underwater. He stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, staring at the reflection of the Grand Meridian in the dark glass of a parked car. His reflection looked small, alone, wronged. He pulled out his phone. His fingers trembled slightly as he unlocked it. He opened his camera, hit record and spoke into it, his voice calm but raw. I just got kicked out of the Grand Meridian Hotel, he said, keeping his eyes on the lens. I had a reservation. I was here for a university event. The manager said I was making guests uncomfortable. He didn't check my reservation properly. He didn't ask questions. He just decided I didn't belong. He paused, swallowed hard. I'm not angry. I'm disappointed, because this shouldn't still be happening. Not in 2024. Not when I've worked so hard to earn my place. He stopped recording, then opened his messages. He typed a quick note to his mother. Just the facts, no drama, no exaggeration. Mom, I was denied check-in at the Grand Meridian. Manager accused me of loitering. I have proof. I'm okay. Just wanted you to know. He attached the video and hit send. Then he called a ride. As he waited under the glow of a street lamp, he watched the hotel's entrance. People came and went, couples in evening wear, business travelers with rolling suitcases, families laughing. No one was stopped. No one was questioned. No one was told they didn't fit the profile. His ride arrived, a friendly driver who greeted him with a warm, "Hey, man." He climbed in, set his bag at his feet, and gave an address for a nearby budget hotel. As the car pulled away from the curb, he looked back one last time at the Grand Meridian, its lights bright against the night sky. Inside, Gregory Holloway was already back at the front desk, smoothing his suit jacket, telling a junior staff member, "Sometimes you just have to trust your instincts. We can't afford to let standards slip." He didn't see the 2 guests near the lobby bar who had exchanged uneasy glances. He didn't notice the woman in the pearl necklace quietly showing her friend the video the young man had just posted online. He didn't know that within an hour, screenshots of the incident would be shared in private group chats, then on social media, then picked up by a local news tip line. And he certainly didn't know that a black town car was already pulling out of a quiet neighborhood on the other side of the city, its passengers staring out the window with a calm, focused expression, and eyes that had seen this kind of injustice far too many times before. But none of that mattered to the young man right now. All he knew was the ache in his chest, the unfairness of it all, and the quiet determination not to let this moment define him. He'd come to Atlanta to prove he belonged in rooms like that. And even if they wouldn't let him in tonight, he'd find another way. He always did. The Uber ride felt longer than it should have. Not because of traffic. Downtown Atlanta was winding down for the night, but because every block seemed to echo with the weight of what had just happened. The young man sat in the back seat, staring out the window as streetlights blurred past. His duffel bag rested at his feet, still zipped, still unused. He hadn't even had a chance to unpack. The driver, a middle-aged man with a kind face and a soft voice, kept glancing in the rearview mirror. "You okay, man?" he finally asked. "You look like you just lost a fight." The young man managed a small smile. Something like that. He didn't go into details. He wasn't in the mood to explain, to relive it out loud. But the driver must have sensed something because he didn't press. Instead, he turned up the radio just enough to fill the silence, some smooth R&B playing low in the background, and drove on. By the time they reached the budget hotel 3 blocks away, the young man had made a decision. He wouldn't let this ruin his weekend. The summit started at 9 the next morning. He still had his registration badge, his notes, his suit for the panel sessions. He'd just sleep somewhere else. Show up on time. Prove once again that he belonged, even if the Grand Meridian didn't think so. He checked into the new hotel without incident. The clerk barely looked up from her phone. The room was modest. Thin carpet, a humming mini-fridge, a view of a parking lot, but it was clean and quiet. He dropped his bag on the bed, washed his face, and sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at his phone. His mother hadn't replied yet. That surprised him. She usually answered within minutes, especially when he sent something serious. Maybe she was in a meeting, or maybe she was choosing her words carefully. He knew her well enough to know she wouldn't react with panic or rage. She'd respond with precision, with purpose. He opened his social media and hesitated. Part of him wanted to delete the video he'd posted. What if it made things worse? What if people twisted his words? But another part, the part that had spent years watching others stay silent, knew he couldn't take it back. Not this time. He hit post. Within minutes, the notification started. First, a message from a classmate. "Bro, that really happened? At the Grand Meridian?" Then another. "I'm staying there right now, I saw it." That manager was out of line. A third. "Don't worry. We've got your back. We'll walk in with you tomorrow if we have to." He read them, grateful but exhausted. He didn't want a spectacle. He just wanted to be treated like everyone else. Meanwhile, back at the Grand Meridian, the mood had shifted. In the lobby, the woman in the pearl necklace, Dr. Lillian Cho, a pediatric surgeon and frequent guest, was still unsettled. She'd watched the whole thing unfold from her seat near the fireplace. She'd seen the young man's calm demeanor, the way he held himself with quiet dignity even as he was being humiliated, and she'd seen the manager's cold certainty, the way he never once double-checked the reservation after the front desk confirmed it. She pulled out her phone and recorded a short voice note for her husband. "You won't believe what just happened here," she said softly. "They threw out a college kid just because he was black. No reason. No warning, just gone." She didn't post it publicly, but she sent it to a few close friends, including a local journalist she'd met at a charity gala last year. Across the lobby, an older man named Harold Jenkins, a retired school principal, sat with his coffee staring into his cup. He'd grown up in the segregated South. He remembered being turned away from restaurants, from hotels, from entire neighborhoods. He thought those days were behind them. But tonight, watching that young man walk out with his head high while the manager stood there like a gatekeeper of whiteness, Harold felt that old anger stir again. He didn't record anything. He didn't post. But he did something just as powerful. He walked up to the front desk. "I'd like to speak to the manager," he said, his voice firm but polite. Gregory Holloway appeared within seconds, still wearing that same tight expression. "Sir, how can I help you?" Harold looked him in the eye. "I saw what you did to that young man." Gregory stiffened. "We follow strict protocols for guest safety." "Spare me the corporate talk," Harold interrupted, his voice low but sharp. "I've been coming to this hotel for 15 years. I've never once seen you question a white guest like that. Not once. Gregory opened his mouth to respond, but Harold held up a hand. I'm checking out tomorrow, and I won't be returning, and I'll be telling everyone I know why. He turned and walked away before Gregory could say another word. Gregory watched him go, a flicker of unease crossing his face, but he quickly buried it. He turned to a junior staff member standing nearby. People get upset over nothing these days, he muttered. You can't please everyone. But the junior staff member, a young woman named Tasha, didn't respond. She'd been working at the Grand Meridian for 6 months, and she'd seen Gregory do this before, always with young black men, always with the same excuses: loitering, suspicious behavior, guest complaints that never seemed to come from actual guests. She'd stayed quiet before, but tonight felt different. Later, during her break, she pulled out her phone and texted a friend who worked at a local civil rights nonprofit. Something bad happened here tonight. You should look into it. Back in his room at the budget hotel, the young man finally got a reply from his mother. Not a text. A call. He answered on the first ring. Are you safe? She asked. Her voice was calm, but he could hear the steel underneath. Yes, Mom, I'm fine. Tell me everything. He did. Every detail from the moment he walked in to the second he stepped outside. He described Gregory's tone, the way the security guards hovered, the silence of the other guests. He played her the video. There was a long pause on the other end. Then she said, I'm coming down there. Mom, you don't have to. I'm not asking, she said gently but firmly. This isn't just about you. It's about what they think they can get away with. He knew better than to argue. When his mother made up her mind, the world bent around her. He didn't ask how she'd get there. She lived an hour away. But he knew she'd find a way. She always did. After they hung up, he tried to sleep, but his mind raced. He thought about the summit tomorrow. Would people stare at him, whisper? Would the hotel staff recognize him and cause more trouble? He didn't want to be the center of a drama. He just wanted to learn, to connect, to grow. But maybe, he thought, this was part of the lesson too. That sometimes just showing up is an act of courage. Meanwhile, online, the story was spreading. The video he posted had been shared over 500 times in under an hour. Comments poured in. This is why I never stay at luxury hotels. They treat us like suspects. Grand Meridian needs to fire that manager ASAP. I stayed there last month. Amazing service. Until now. This is 2024. How is this still happening? A local news station picked it up. Their social media team posted a short clip with the caption, Alleged racial profiling at downtown Atlanta hotel. We're looking into it. At the Grand Meridian, the front desk phone started ringing. First, a guest canceling their reservation for next week. After what I saw online, I can't in good conscience stay there, she said. Then another. And another. The night manager, a woman named Diane, tried to keep things calm. She'd worked in hospitality for 20 years. She knew reputation was everything. One bad incident could snowball. She found Gregory in his office reviewing schedules. Did you see the social media posts? She asked. He waved a hand. It's one kid with a phone. People love drama. Gregory, we've had 3 cancellations in the last 20 minutes. Corporate just called. They're monitoring the situation. He scoffed. They'll calm down. It's just noise, but Diane wasn't so sure. She'd seen real crises before. Food poisoning outbreaks, fire alarms, even a celebrity scandal. But this was different. This touched something deeper, something people wouldn't forget. She made a mental note to document everything, just in case. Back in his room, the young man finally drifted off to sleep around 2 a.m., his phone still buzzing with notifications on the nightstand. He dreamed of walking into a grand ballroom, dressed in his best suit, shaking hands with mentors, answering questions with confidence. In the dream, no one questioned his right to be there. No one looked at him like he was a problem. When his alarm went off at 7 a.m., he woke up feeling tired but resolved. He showered, shaved, put on his suit, and packed his notes. He checked his phone. Over 1,000 likes on his post, dozens of supportive messages, and one unread text from his mother. On my way. Don't go to the hotel alone. He smiled faintly. She was already in motion. He grabbed his bag and headed out. The sun was up, the city alive again. He walked the 3 blocks back to the Grand Meridian, not with anger but with quiet determination. He wasn't coming back to confront anyone. He was coming back because the summit was there, and he refused to let fear or shame keep him away. As he approached the entrance, he saw a small group of students from his university gathered near the doors. One of them spotted him and waved. "Hey, we heard what happened," a young woman said. "We're all sticking together today. No one walks in alone." He nodded, touched by their solidarity. They walked in as a group, shoulders squared, heads high. Inside, the lobby was quieter than last night. Fewer guests, more staff hovering near the front desk, watching. Gregory wasn't at the desk, but he was nearby, talking to Diane in hushed tones. When he saw the young man walk in with his classmates, his face tightened. He turned away quickly, as if pretending not to see him. The young man didn't look at him. He went straight to the ballroom entrance, where event staff were checking badges. His badge worked. He was let in without a word, but as he stepped inside the grand room, filled with round tables, name tags, and the low hum of professional chatter, he felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. He'd made it in, but at what cost? He didn't know it yet, but his mother was already 10 minutes away. And when she arrived, the real reckoning would begin. For now, he took a seat near the front, opened his notebook, and prepared to listen. He was here to learn, to grow, to prove that his presence mattered, and no one, not a biased manager, not a system built on exclusion, was going to take that away from him. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Grand Meridian's ballroom, casting warm rectangles of light across the polished floor. Inside, the University Leadership Summit was in full swing. Guest speakers at the podium, students leaning forward in their chairs, the soft clink of coffee cups, the rustle of notepaper. It felt like a normal, productive day, but beneath the surface, tension hummed like a low electrical current. The young man sat near the front, listening intently as a venture capitalist shared lessons from building a startup. He took notes, asked a thoughtful question during Q&A, and even exchanged business cards with a recruiter during the break. On the outside, he looked composed, focused, just another promising student making the most of an opportunity. But inside, he kept glancing toward the ballroom doors, half expecting to see security come in and ask him to leave again. He hadn't told the event organizers what happened the night before. He didn't want to cause a scene or be seen as making it about race, but the memory clung to him like static. Outside the ballroom, the hotel staff moved with unusual caution. The front desk team exchanged quiet words. Housekeeping lingered near the service elevators, whispering. Even the bellhops seemed to walk more slowly, eyes darting toward the entrance every time the doors opened. Gregory Holloway had spent the morning in damage control. He'd drafted an internal email calling the previous night's incident a minor misunderstanding and insisted no policy was violated. He'd told Diane, the night manager, not to worry, that corporate would back him up, but his hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. Every time his phone buzzed, he flinched. He hadn't slept much. The social media storm had grown overnight. A local news outlet had published a short article titled "Student Claims Racial Profiling at Downtown Hotel." Comments flooded in, some supportive, some defensive, but all keeping the story alive. Worse, 2 major corporate clients had called to ask if the Grand Meridian was still a safe and inclusive environment for their employees. Safe. Inclusive. Words that now felt like accusations. Still, Gregory told himself it would blow over. People got upset over nothing these days. One video, one angry mother. How much trouble could it really cause? He was about to find out. At 11:17 a.m., a black town car pulled up to the hotel's porte-cochere. It wasn't flashy, just sleek, quiet, and expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. She emerged with the kind of calm that commanded space without demanding it. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, low heels, and simple gold earrings, she carried no purse, just a leather portfolio and an air of quiet authority. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her expression unreadable. But her eyes, sharp, steady, and deeply familiar to anyone who followed civil rights issues in the state, told a different story. This wasn't a woman who came to complain. She came to correct. The doorman, who'd worked at the Grand Meridian for 8 years, recognized her instantly. He'd seen her on the news, testifying before the city council, accepting awards for her legal work. His stomach dropped. He held the door open a little longer than usual, giving her a respectful nod. She returned it with a small, polite smile, nothing more. Inside the lobby, the atmosphere shifted the moment she stepped through the doors. It wasn't dramatic. No music swelled. No one gasped. But people noticed. A couple checking out paused mid-signature. A concierge straightened his tie. Even the pianist in the lounge softened his playing, as if sensing the change in the room's energy. She walked directly to the front desk, her heels clicking softly against the marble. The clerk, Tasha, the same young woman who'd texted her friend the night before, looked up and froze for half a second before forcing a professional smile. "Good morning."
How can I help you?
"I'm here to speak with the manager who removed my son from this hotel last night," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and carried just enough weight to be heard across the lobby. Tasha's throat went dry. "May I have your name, please?" "You may," she replied, "but I'd prefer to speak with him directly." Before Tasha could respond, Gregory Holloway appeared from the side office. He'd seen her through the glass doors and rushed out, smoothing his jacket, rehearsing his lines in his head. He'd imagined angry shouting, tears, demands. He was ready to deflect, to explain, to minimize. What he wasn't ready for was the quiet certainty in her eyes as she turned to face him. "Mr. Holloway," she said, using his name like a fact, not a question. He blinked. "Yes, can I help you?" "My son was denied entry to this hotel last night, despite having a confirmed reservation and proper identification. You accused him of loitering and making guests uncomfortable. You ordered security to remove him. Is that correct?" Gregory's mouth opened, then closed. He hadn't expected her to lay it out so cleanly, so coldly. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset." "I'm not upset," she interrupted gently but firmly. "I'm here to understand what policy you were following when you violated state and federal public accommodation laws." The words landed like stones in still water. Around them, conversation stopped. A man pretending to read a newspaper lowered it slightly. The concierge stopped typing. Gregory's face flushed. "We have a responsibility to ensure the safety and comfort of all our guests," he said, falling back on his script. "There were concerns." "What concerns?" she asked. "Name one." "Was he loud? Aggressive? Did he refuse to show ID? Did he enter a restricted area?" Gregory hesitated. He didn't seem like he belonged. The phrase hung in the air, naked and ugly. She didn't flinch. Because he's black, it wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Gregory looked around as if hoping someone would step in. But no one did. Even Diane, watching from the office doorway, stayed silent. "I didn't say that," he mumbled. "You didn't have to," she replied. "Your actions spoke clearly enough." She reached into her portfolio and pulled out a printed copy of her son's reservation confirmation, his university ID, and a screenshot of the event guest list with his name highlighted. "Here is proof of his right to be here. Here is proof that he was registered for a legitimate university function. And here," she added, pulling out her phone, "is a video of you refusing to verify his reservation and ordering him removed without cause." Gregory's eyes darted to the phone, then away. "That's taken out of context." "Then provide the full context," she said. "Where is your security footage? Where are the guest complaints you cited? Where is the incident report you're required to file for any guest removal?" He had none of those things, because there had been no real incident, just a snap judgment based on bias. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult him. She simply stood there, presenting facts like pieces of evidence in a courtroom, which, given her background, was exactly what she was trained to do. "I've already contacted the Georgia Commission on Equal Opportunity," she continued. "They've opened a preliminary inquiry. I've also notified the U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, as this appears to be a clear violation of Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination in places of public accommodation." Gregory paled. "You're going to the feds over this?" "I'm going to the law," she corrected. "There's a difference." At that moment, Diane stepped forward. "Ma'am," she said quickly, "I'm the night operations manager. I'd like to personally apologize for what happened. This is not how we treat guests at the Grand Meridian." The mother turned to her, her expression softening slightly, but not much. "Then why did it happen?" Diane glanced at Gregory, then back. "We're looking into it immediately." She pulled out her radio. "Get regional on the line now. Within 5 minutes." The hotel's regional director, A man named Carl, who lived an hour away but had been monitoring the situation since dawn, was on a video call from Diane's office. He listened as Diane summarized the situation, then asked to speak directly with the visitor. She stepped into the office, leaving Gregory standing alone in the lobby, sweating in his suit. Inside, Carl's face was tight with stress. "Ma'am, I can't tell you how sorry I am. This is completely unacceptable. Mr. Holloway's actions do not reflect our values or our policies." "I'm glad to hear that," she said. "What are you going to do about it?" "We're placing him on administrative leave effective immediately. We'll conduct a full internal investigation, and we'd like to offer your son a full refund, a public apology, and a lifetime complimentary stay at any of our properties." She considered this. A lifetime stay won't undo the humiliation he faced, or the message it sends to other young people who look like him. "I understand," Carl said quickly. "We're also mandating anti-bias training for all staff, starting next week. And we'd like your input on how we can rebuild trust with the community." She nodded slowly. "That's a start. But accountability comes first. I expect a written statement by end of day confirming Mr. Holloway's suspension and the steps you're taking. And I expect your corporate office to release it publicly." "You'll have it," Carl promised. She stood. "One more thing. My son is attending a university event in your ballroom right now. He shouldn't have to worry about being harassed or watched. I expect your staff to treat him with the same respect they'd show any other guest." "Absolutely," Carl said. "He's welcome here always." She left the office and walked back into the lobby. Gregory was still there, standing stiffly near the front desk, avoiding eye contact. She didn't look at him as she passed. Instead, she turned to Tasha. "Thank you for your professionalism," she said quietly. Tasha, surprised, nodded. "I'm sorry this happened." "You didn't cause it," the mother replied. "But your silence could have made it worse." "I'm glad you chose to speak up." Tasha's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't told anyone she'd sent that text. But somehow this woman knew. Or maybe she just understood how these things worked. The quiet acts of courage that happened behind the scenes. The mother walked toward the ballroom, her steps measured, her presence still rippling through the space. As she passed the lounge, the pianist played a little louder, as if trying to fill the silence she left behind. Inside the ballroom, her son was listening to a panel on ethical leadership. He hadn't seen her come in, but when he glanced toward the back of the room and saw her standing there, calm, present, unshaken, he felt something inside him loosen. The tight knot of shame, of doubt, began to unravel. She didn't wave. She didn't interrupt. She simply found a seat in the back and listened. But everyone in that room knew something had changed. Outside, Gregory Holloway was escorted to his office by Diane to collect his things. Staff watched in silence as he packed his desk, his face red with humiliation. No one offered to help. No one said goodbye. And in the lobby, the front desk phone rang again. Another cancellation. Another guest saying, "After what I saw this morning, I can't stay here." But none of that mattered to the mother now. She'd done what she came to do. Not for revenge, not for attention, but for justice. For her son. For every young person who'd been told, in words or in silence, that they didn't belong. She sat in the back of the ballroom, listening to the future being discussed, and for the first time that day, she allowed herself to breathe. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of the Grand Meridian's executive conference room, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. Inside, the air was thick with tension, not the kind that crackles with anger, but the quiet, heavy kind that comes when people realize they've made a serious mistake and are scrambling to fix it before it's too late. The regional director, Carl, had arrived in person just an hour after the phone call, his shirt slightly wrinkled from the drive, his tie pulled loose. He'd shaken hands with the mother, firm, respectful, eyes steady, and apologized again, this time without corporate jargon. "This shouldn't have happened," he said plainly, "and it won't happen again." Now, seated across from her at the table, he laid out a folder thick with printed emails, policy documents, and draft statements. Two members of the hotel's legal team sat nearby, laptops open, ready to take notes. The mother didn't look impressed. She'd seen this dance before, companies offering polished words while hoping the problem would just go away. "I appreciate the gesture," she said, her voice calm but firm, "but I'm not here for a meeting. I'm here for accountability." Carl nodded quickly. Understood. That's why I've already taken action. He slid a printed notice across the table. Gregory Holloway has been placed on immediate administrative leave, effective this morning. A full internal investigation will be conducted by our corporate HR and compliance team, with an outside third-party auditor to ensure impartiality. She read the document carefully, her expression unreadable. And what happens if the investigation confirms what we already know, that he profiled my son based on race? Then his employment will be terminated, Carl said without hesitation, and we'll report the findings to the Georgia Commission on Equal Opportunity as required by law. She looked up. Good. But accountability isn't just about one person. It's about the system that allowed this to happen. Carl leaned forward. We agree. That's why we're rolling out mandatory anti-bias and cultural competency training for every employee. Front desk, security, housekeeping, management, starting next week. We're also revising our guest interaction protocols to require written documentation for any guest removal, with dual approval from both the on-site manager and regional leadership. She nodded slowly. Those are steps, but they're reactive. What about prevention? We're creating a guest experience advisory council, Carl continued, made up of community leaders, diversity experts, and past guests from underrepresented groups. They'll review our policies quarterly and provide feedback. And we're partnering with local universities, including your son's, to offer paid internships in hospitality management for students of color. This time, she allowed a small, almost imperceptible softening in her eyes. Not forgiveness, just acknowledgement that they were trying to move in the right direction. Those are meaningful actions, she said. But words mean little without transparency. Carl didn't flinch. We'll issue a public statement by 5 p.m. today. It will include an apology, confirmation of Mr. Holloway's suspension, and a summary of the changes we're implementing. We'll post it on our website, social media, and send it to local media outlets. And you'll name what happened for what it was, she added. Not a misunderstanding, not a regrettable incident, racial discrimination. Carl took a breath. He knew that wording would make corporate nervous, but he also knew that if they softened the language, the whole thing would ring hollow. Yes, he said. We'll call it what it was. She closed the folder and placed her hands flat on the table. One more thing. My son is still attending the summit. He shouldn't have to walk through your lobby wondering if someone's watching him, judging him, waiting for him to prove he belongs. He won't, Carl said firmly. I've already briefed all department heads. He's to be treated with the utmost respect. If any staff member makes him feel unwelcome, even with a look, they'll face immediate disciplinary action. She studied him for a long moment. Then she stood. I'll hold you to that. As she left the conference room, Carl exhaled deeply. One of his legal advisors leaned over. Do you really think she'll accept this? I don't know, Carl admitted. But she's right. We can't just fix the symptom. We have to fix the disease. Meanwhile, in the ballroom, the summit was wrapping up its final panel. The young man had spent the afternoon listening, learning, even laughing during a surprisingly funny talk about startup failures. He'd exchanged numbers with 3 professionals who seemed genuinely interested in his ideas. For the first time since last night, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. During the closing remarks, he glanced toward the back of the room. His mother was gone. He felt a pang of disappointment, then saw her standing just outside the ballroom doors, speaking quietly with the university event coordinator. She must have explained what happened, because the coordinator nodded solemnly, then walked over to the young man as the crowd began to disperse. I just want you to know, the coordinator said, that if you ever feel unsafe or unwelcome at any of our events, you tell us. Immediately. We've already spoken with the hotel management. They've assured us this won't happen again, and if it does, we'll move our entire program. The young man thanked him, touched by the support. He hadn't expected the university to step in, but it meant a lot. As he gathered his things, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Meet me in the lobby when you're ready. He took a deep breath and walked out. The lobby looked different now, quieter, less grand. The marble floors still gleamed. The chandeliers still sparkled, but the air felt heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. His mother stood near the front desk, not waiting in line, not demanding attention, just present. And the staff? They moved with extra care. The front desk clerk gave him a small, genuine smile. A bellhop nodded respectfully. Even the security guard who'd hovered last night avoided eye contact, looking almost ashamed. She didn't say much as they walked out. "Just, you did good today," he nodded. "Thanks for coming." "I didn't come for you," she said gently. "I came because someone had to." They stepped outside into the warm afternoon light. The city buzzed around them. Cars, tourists, street vendors selling cold drinks. Normal life moving on. But back inside the Grand Meridian, things were changing fast. By 3 p.m., corporate headquarters had approved the public statement. By 4 p.m., it was drafted, reviewed, and sent to press. By 4:45, it went live on the hotel's website and social media. The Grand Meridian Hotel deeply apologizes for the discriminatory treatment of a guest at our Atlanta location on Friday evening. The guest, a registered attendee of a university leadership summit, was wrongfully denied check-in based on racial bias. This action violated our core values and state and federal anti-discrimination laws. The manager involved has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. We are implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, revising our guest interaction policies, and establishing a community advisory council to ensure this never happens again. We are committed to becoming a truly inclusive space for all. Within minutes, the post was shared hundreds of times. Comments poured in. Finally, a company that admits fault. Hope they follow through. This is why representation in leadership matters. My son could have been that young man. Thank you for standing up. News outlets picked it up. By evening, it was the top story on 2 local stations, but the real impact was happening behind the scenes. That afternoon, Tasha, the front desk clerk, received a call from her supervisor. Corporate wants to talk to staff who witnessed the incident, she was told. They're asking for honest feedback. She took a deep breath and told the truth, that Gregory had a pattern, that he'd made comments before, that she'd stayed quiet because she was afraid of losing her job. To her surprise, the corporate rep thanked her. "Your honesty helps us fix this," they said. "And your job is safe." Other staff came forward too. The security guard admitted he'd felt uncomfortable but didn't know how to object. The concierge shared that he'd heard Gregory say, "We can't let the wrong kind of people think they can just walk in here." Each testimony added weight to the case. By 6 p.m., the investigation was no longer just about one night. It was about a culture and how to change it. Back at home, the young man sat on his couch flipping through his notes from the summit. He'd learned about negotiation, leadership, ethical decision-making, but the most important lesson hadn't been in any presentation. It was this: dignity isn't given. It's claimed. And sometimes you need someone in your corner who refuses to let the world treat you as less than you are. His phone rang. It was a local reporter. "Would you be willing to speak on camera about what happened?" He thought about it, then said, "Only if my mother is there too, because this wasn't just his story anymore. It was theirs. It was everyone's who'd ever been told with words or with silence that they didn't belong." Later that night, as the city lights flickered on, the Grand Meridian stood quiet. No guests were being turned away. No young men were being questioned for simply existing. And in the manager's office, a new sign was being printed. Guest Experience Manager, Interim. The old one was already in a box, waiting to be removed. Change doesn't happen in a day. But sometimes it starts with one mother walking through a hotel door and refusing to leave until things are made right. Weeks passed. The Atlanta summer deepened, the air thick with heat and the sound of cicadas. The Grand Meridian Hotel still stood in the heart of downtown, its glass facade catching the sun like always. But something inside had shifted. It wasn't just the new signage at the front desk or the framed statement about inclusion now displayed near the lobby elevators. It was quieter than that, a change in how staff made eye contact, how they greeted guests, how they paused before making assumptions. The story that began with one young man being turned away had rippled far beyond those marble halls. Nationally, news outlets covered the hotel's public apology and the swift action taken against the manager. Civil rights organizations cited the case in calls for stronger enforcement of anti-discrimination laws in hospitality. A few other hotel chains quietly announced their own reviews of guest interaction policies, not wanting to be next. But for the people at the center of it all, life moved forward, not with fanfare, but with purpose. The young man returned to campus not as a victim, but as someone who'd faced injustice and refused to let it define him. At first, he wasn't sure he wanted to speak publicly. He worried people would see him only as the kid who got kicked out of the hotel, not as the student, the thinker, the future leader he was working to become. But then he started getting messages from high schoolers, from other college students, even from adults who'd faced similar moments and never said a word. One message stuck with him. "You made me feel less alone." That changed his mind. He agreed to speak at a youth leadership forum hosted by a local nonprofit, not to rehash the pain but to talk about what came after, the importance of documenting incidents, knowing your rights, and leaning on community. He spoke calmly without bitterness, and the room listened. Afterward, 3 young men waited to talk to him, their eyes serious. "What do you do?" one asked, "when it happens and no one believes you?" He told them, "You keep your receipts. You find your people, and you never stop showing up." Meanwhile, his mother didn't stop either. She used the moment not for personal gain, but for systemic change. She met with city officials, urging them to strengthen penalties for businesses that violate public accommodation laws. She worked with a coalition of lawyers and advocates to create a free legal hotline for discrimination complaints in public spaces, restaurants, hotels, stores, theaters. "Justice shouldn't depend on who your parents are," she told a reporter. "It should be available to everyone." Her words carried weight. Within 2 months, the hotline launched, staffed by volunteers and funded by small donations. The first call came from a grandmother in Savannah who'd been followed around a department store. The second, from a college student denied service at a coffee shop. Each story was different, but the pain was the same. The feeling of being seen as a threat just for existing. Back at the Grand Meridian, real changes took root. Gregory Holloway was officially terminated after the internal investigation confirmed a pattern of biased behavior. Corporate didn't just fire him. They shared the findings with names redacted with industry associations, making it harder for him to quietly move to another luxury hotel under a different name. Mandatory anti-bias training began the following week. It wasn't a 1-hour video watched on a laptop. It was led by local diversity educators, included role-playing scenarios, and required staff to reflect on their own assumptions. Tasha, the front desk clerk, was promoted to guest relations coordinator, a role created specifically to ensure every guest felt welcomed from the moment they walked in. The hotel also launched its Community Advisory Council. The first meeting included a retired judge, a black business owner, a disability rights advocate, and a representative from the university where the summit had been held. They didn't just rubber stamp policies, they challenged them. One of their first recommendations? Require all managers to complete a certification in inclusive leadership before being hired. Perhaps the most symbolic moment came 3 months after the incident. The Grand Meridian hosted its first annual Equity and Hospitality Summit, a full-day event bringing together hotel staff, community leaders, students, and civil rights experts to discuss how to build truly inclusive spaces. The keynote speaker, the young man who'd once been turned away at the door. He arrived early that morning, dressed in a sharp navy suit, his notes tucked neatly in a folder. As he walked through the lobby, staff greeted him by name. The front desk team smiled. Even the security guards nodded respectfully. No one asked for his ID. No one questioned why he was there. He stepped into the grand ballroom, the same one where he'd sat nervously months before, and looked out at the audience. Hotel executives, housekeepers, students, city officials, and his mother, sitting in the front row, her expression calm but proud. He didn't open with anger. He opened with gratitude. "Thank you for having me back," he said into the microphone. "Last time I was in this room, I wasn't sure I belonged. Today I know I do. Not because I proved anything, but because belonging shouldn't have to be earned. It should be given." He spoke about dignity, about the difference between tolerance and true inclusion, about how one moment of bias can echo for years, but so can one act of courage. After his talk, people lined up to speak with him. A housekeeper thanked him for giving her the courage to report a guest who'd made racist remarks. A young intern said his speech inspired her to apply for management training. Even the regional director Carl approached him quietly. "You didn't have to come back," he said. "But you did. That means more than you know." Later, as the event wound down, the young man found his mother near the lobby fountain. She was sipping tea, watching the water ripple under the soft lights. "You were good up there," she said simply. "I learned from the best," he replied. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the hum of the city outside blending with the quiet murmur of the hotel. "I used to think change happened in courtrooms or city halls," he said after a while. "But it also happens in lobbies, in classrooms, in conversations like the one we're having right now." She smiled. "It happens wherever people choose to do better." As they walked out together, the evening air warm against their skin, neither looked back at the hotel. They didn't need to. The work wasn't finished, but it was moving forward, and in the weeks that followed, more stories emerged. Not of exclusion, but of repair. A local restaurant owner reached out to the legal hotline after overhearing staff make a biased comment. A mall security team invited the advisory council to help redesign their guest interaction protocols. Even other students began documenting incidents and demanding accountability, not with rage, but with clarity and community. The young man kept studying. He landed the internship he'd hoped for. He kept speaking when asked, but never let that one moment overshadow his dreams. He knew his worth wasn't tied to that hotel, or that manager, or even that viral video. It was tied to how he chose to move through the world, with grace, with truth, and with the quiet understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show up again. His mother continued her work, not as a crusader, but as a steady presence, someone who believed that systems could change if enough people refused to accept them as they were. And the Grand Meridian? It didn't become perfect overnight, but it became better. Staff reported fewer guest complaints about bias. Online reviews began to mention warm, respectful service. And when a black family checked in for a wedding weekend months later, the front desk clerk, Tasha, greeted them with genuine warmth, offered a room upgrade for the grandparents, and made sure their bags were delivered promptly. No one made a big deal of it. That was the point, because real change isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the absence of a problem that used to be normal. Sometimes it's a young man walking into a hotel not as a symbol but as a guest. Sometimes it's a mother watching her child speak on a stage he was once told he didn't belong on, and knowing that the world, slowly, is learning to make space. Years from now, people might forget the details of that Friday night. But the lesson would remain: dignity is not a privilege. It's a right. And when it's denied, someone will always rise. Not just to reclaim it for themselves, but to ensure it's protected for everyone who comes after. As the city lights shimmered against the night sky, the Grand Meridian stood not as a monument to a mistake, but as a reminder that even the grandest institutions can learn, grow, and choose to do better if someone is brave enough to knock on the door and say, "I belong here."